Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Sit back and listen to interviews, discussion about books, and anything else literary. There's always something or someone new on the show.
Good evening, listeners. I'm Amy Shannon, and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Conversations, revelations, and inspirations behind the book. You never know where the conversation will lead us, so let's find out. Tonight we have a guest with us, so thank you for joining us. Will you please introduce yourself?
No problem. This is Dennis Carson, and I'm the author of an award-winning true crime book called Every Killer Leaves a Trace. And I think today we're going to focus on one of the 26 killers. Is that right, Amy?
Yes, Israel Keyes.
Yeah.
I think that is very something that really needs to be revisited. So, for listeners who are listening for the first time, Dennis was on the show before, and we discussed, like he mentioned, his book, and it had various, we talked about how dumb criminals could be. So he's back on, and we're going to focus on one of the subjects in the book, and so we can. And also, this is a spotlight episode, so it will be 30 minutes, just so audience knows. And so you sent me a document, and you called it Israel Keyes and the Illusion of the Perfect Planner. So why don't you get started on that conversation?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Israel Keyes is an interesting character. And in the book club meetings I've had with people, they've asked me, pick a case that you think knocks it out of the ballpark insofar as being, a strange, and interesting killer. And I have picked Israel Keyes because he is something very rare in the true crime world. He thought he planned everything much better than everybody else, and he didn't. He traveled constantly, okay. He avoided patterns, okay. He cached weapons years in advance. That's interesting. Nobody else did that.
Yeah.
He chose victims at random. Well, okay, some did, some didn't. He wanted everybody to believe that he had engineered a killing system that was immune to detection. And the interesting thing about... I'm sorry?
I was just going to ask you, you said that he avoided patterns, but isn't that in itself a pattern?
Yeah, that's interesting. You're right. It is.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I've read things before about that, I don't do, everything was, different, but in itself, it, it's a pattern. They just don't think of it as one. They don't think that, oh no, I don't have a real MO. I just go out and kill people. It doesn't matter who they are. I cache weapons. It doesn't matter. No one's going to find me because I travel, and I go state to state. They think that, oh yeah, that's how they're going to get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is they all think that, but they all ultimately get caught. And that's the whole nature of the book. But I think Keyes is different in several areas. A lot of these killers have they get caught through travel records, financial transactions, vehicle movements, things like that.
Right.
But what made him interesting is that he got caught because of his cash withdrawals. I think we talked about this in our last podcast. One of the dumbest things that he did, which none of the other 26 killers or 25 killers did, is he used the victim's debit card. Now, you got to be an idiot to do something like that. You really do.
Yeah, you don't do that. Maybe trust their wallet, get rid of whatever card that person has in it. But no, you don't use. I mean, And you
It
don't give it
doesn't get,
to like a homeless person either. You know, I've read about situations where they thought, oh, we'll get away with it because, you know, we'll take this dead person who we just killed, all their credit cards and cash and just kind of give them out to homeless people. And then when they're tracked, they're not tracked to the killer, but you know, they don't think that the homeless person will say, oh yeah, this guy gave it to me.
yeah, yeah. What's interesting about Keyes was his forensic consistency, which none of the other killers really had a consistency. They may have had a couple things, but you know, he had 5 consistencies: cash withdrawals, surveillance footage that he didn't realize was there, rental cars, pretty stupid, use your name on a rental car, um, and border crossings. So they're very different. Um, and you know, he stands out. You know, we could talk about the other killers, but I don't think you're going to find anybody more interesting than Keyes. And when I've done book club interviews, 9 out of 10 have said, you know what? You can point your finger at Keyes. He's the guy. You know, okay. He's the guy.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, border crossings, cameras, you know, depending on, you know, where he was going. I mean, now everybody you can't go through a toll without the Easy Pass or whatever they call them anymore. I don't know if they're the same in different states, but you know, if you travel highway or if you travel back roads, still, that also gives you a pattern.
That's right. That's right. You know, he left traces behind, not because he was sloppy, but because movement itself generates evidence. And he didn't realize that. Every trip that he created, wow, you know, every transaction left a footprint. Every decision narrowed the range of plausible deniability. So this guy was a real piece of work. I guess that's what you could say at the end of the day. This is the guy that was the piece of work. Here are the things. Let's talk about the things that he could not erase.
Okay.
And I've been asked this question many times. Digital records, financial trails, like the credit card, debit card, geographic consistency, behavior overlap. He did the same thing every single time. It was like it was a machine. And he didn't escape forensic truth. He only delayed it. Ultimately, that's how he got caught, was forensics.
Yeah, so for listeners who aren't sure or have never heard of Israel Keys, what were his crimes? And you
He,
don't have to mention the victims. I mean, I feel you know, we honor the victims, but I just want to know what he actually.
well, Keyes was known, he had a moniker. He was called the cross-country killer because he used rails to go across the country. And what's interesting about that is as he traveled across the country, he buried kill kits so that when he wanted to go back to that area to make a killing, he had a whole kit right there. He didn't have to take anything with him. That's unique. Nobody else did anything like that. So investigators were chasing a trail that was cold, but yet calculated.
And yet he was, you know, he traveled by train. Was it like he jumped on it in a car or something? Or
Yeah, but he also physically bought tickets for certain trips, which again, stupidity.
yeah, really, and I'm sure he didn't realize too is that railroads only go, so far and to various places. So if he's killing people near where he escapes, so to speak, that and that leaves like the trail of railroad, almost as if he was going down the interstate, through whatever states he was going through. So that's interesting. And I have a question about, like, he has that moniker, and I've heard a lot about, people, or I don't know if it's journalism, it's law enforcement, but they give a nickname or a moniker to the killer, um, and, some think that's, uh, you know, a good thing and others don't think that, but, everybody has there's some type of moniker with a lot of, serial killers.
That's true. All 26 of the killers in my book have a moniker, like Rodney Akala, which like most people are familiar with. He was a dating game killer.
Remember that?
Yeah. And what about John Gacy, the killer clown?
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, and Cameron Hooker, the girl in the box killer. Now you think about that one. Okay. Tell me about this girl in the box. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then, James Bila, the panty rapist. Okay, that's interesting. How did he get the panties? Somebody, he just didn't, some woman just didn't hand them to him, say, come along and kill me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, it all becomes really interesting. And, Ted Bundy, another campus killer. Well, okay, you could figure that one out. And how about Bobby Joe Long, the classified ad rapist? Now, there's one that you can't just figure out instantly. His whole thing was every time he killed somebody, he posted in the classified ads, well, this is the best doggone rope you can use to hang somebody with. This is the best knife you can use to slit a throat. I mean, how can you be that dumb,
Really? And he probably paid for it with his own money.
Yeah, probably. That's right.
Here, just put it on my credit card. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Or his victim's credit card. You never know.
and one of my favorites, I get asked about this guy a lot, Kyler Yost. He was known as the car burning killer. So what he did is every time he killed somebody, he burned their car. Why?
Was them in it?
Why?
Was it?
No.
Oh.
He killed him and then he went back and burned the car. Give me a break.
What the? That's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that I understand, but that's why I asked, were the victims in the car? That I can see as them maybe thinking it's a forensic countermeasure, but really just going back to the scene of the crime and setting the car on fire, that's really ridiculous.
That borders on stupidity.
Yeah, it's they say they return to the scene of the crime, but they don't normally set something on fire to let people know they came back.
Right. There's a dangerous myth that gets raised a lot when I do interviews, is that smart killers get away with it. That's not true. Absolutely not true. There is no real smart killer. Everyone leaves a trace of some sort, and that's what does it.
Yeah, they're egotistical to think that, oh, I'm going to be the one that never gets caught.
That's right.
And, and everybody has their own things. Even the killer who may have shaved himself from head to toe, he's, hoping not to drop a hair or whatever. And then I think about, I love that show, Dexter, um, and I'm thinking, at some point, he was stupid. People figured who he was.
If you look at these 26 cases in totality, the mistakes they made aren't necessarily obvious, but they're cumulative. The same pattern in each killer. And, you would think they could diversify, but no, they don't.
Yeah, and, and I heard that there's sometimes, and I've gotten this off of documentaries and even just, uh, police procedural shows that I like to watch. And I found, there was a few where the killer was trying to find his own way. So he would mimic other, infamous serial killers, find out what kind of kill worked for him.
Right.
And that in
That's true.
itself was a pattern because, he was doing, Son of Sam and, Ted Bundy and all had various different ways to do it. He tried to, use his hands once to choke a victim, but then, he realized that there's easier ways to choke somebody. Choking someone with your bare hands, it takes a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I recall many moons ago, I was in an autopsy suite with one of the local coroners, and a couple of the detectives involved in the case asked the question about, well, wait a minute, tell me why. And they're asking the coroner now, and they're the detective, which is like a role reversal, right?
Yeah.
Tell me why you think this guy got caught. And I'm looking at the two detectives and I'm going, why are you asking the coroner this question? He can only tell you what happened, and how the method of the kill, etc. But it's your job, not my job, not the coroner's job, to figure out how or why. That's your problem. And,
Yeah.
and I see that a lot. There's one particular detective, and I don't know if I should really mention his name, but he's out of Texas. And Dustin and I have had quite a few conversations about another case that I haven't decided to work on. But one day he burst out laughing when he was talking about the kill and the method of the kill and the killer. And I said, "What's so damn funny, Dustin?" He says, "This guy's an idiot." Those are his words. This guy's an idiot.
That's interesting.
I lost your audio.
Yeah, I got you back.
Okay.
So he was, why did he believe this guy was an idiot?
Well, because he investigated the case, and very briefly, it was a case of this young woman was found naked in a hotel room, and her throat was slit, and there was evidence found on the scene, at the crime scene, of the killer's hat, hello, a pair of gloves, hello, and I'm going, Dustin, give me a break here. You've got the evidence in your hand. Why are you asking the coroner to tell you? You've got it in your hand, for doggone sake.
Yeah. I don't know. I could see, obviously the coroner, he knows, most of the time, sometimes it's not obvious cause of death. It's not always obvious, especially if it's poisoning or, OD, whether it's it's an intentional OD or an accidental one by a drug user or someone wanting to kill somebody because they think, by doing an OD, because they think that would cover up them actually killing, covering up as a murder. And some kills are up close and personal, but it's not, you're right, it's not the coroner's job to tell you, oh, well, I think this person, knew this other guy or whatever. Pick up, I want to say, if we were, I'm looking at the outline you sent me. We talked about, he thought if he could, he thought he had more control over his crime scene, things like that, before, he got caught, but he thought that everything was all under his control because he thought he knew what people or detectives would look for. And that's a mistake that I'm guessing that, as, you were saying, that, and, they think they can get away with it because they think just because they watched CSI or something that, oh, I know what not to do. I remember the CSI effect.
Amy, you are absolutely spot on that. They just think because they've seen something, they've heard something that, whatever, that they could do it and they won't get caught. That doesn't happen. That's not the real world.
Yeah, exactly. There's always something. I mean, I don't remember the case, but I heard of something a long time ago that, the killer actually was chewing gum and he spit it out. And not only had he had a tooth impression, but he also left his DNA, obviously, through saliva on the gum.
That's right. I've heard about that. They think they're so smart, but in reality, they're pretty dang on dumb.
Yeah, even the ones that actually have some type of intelligence, maybe they have a high IQ where they think they can get away with stuff, or, they're sociopaths and like they think they can blend in and mimic, emotions. And there's the psychopath that they think that they can just get away with it. They're driven by whatever is, their, I don't know what you would call it. I want to say, I lost my thought, but, their need, they think they have this need or this desire or like it's something built into them that that's what they need to do. And that every time they kill someone, there is something that they do that is just for them. And it could be something very small or something, very obvious.
That's very true. Very true. And that's the whole point behind the book. Every killer leaves a trace. It's exactly what you just said. They leave a trace of something.
Yeah. And they think, oh, I'm the only one that likes that, whatever it is, from taking their shoes or, taking trophies or even parts of the victim themselves, or they do something, and there's a lot of things that people can do, and I'm not going to go down that fetish trail, but, they think that they're the only ones that will do it. So, it won't lead back to them because nobody knows about it. It's secret.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned shoes. There's one of these killers, and for the life of me, I can't bring the name back up readily, but he got caught because his shoe pattern, the footprint, was highly unique and not common in that geographic area.
Huh.
It was some crazy boot that just, doesn't get worn or didn't get worn in that particular area. And that's how he got caught. And they tracked it back to the stores that sold those boots. And they had a list of killers and they just, of buyers, and they just went down the list until they nailed them.
Yep, that's what happens when you have, something custom. I've, can't remember where, but I remember I was watching this show and there was, on it was it was about a book that how to commit the perfect murder, and, people that wanted to kill people, would use it as a guidebook. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what they thought would be very smart is if they wore like a shoe size too big for them, stuff it with sock or something in the front so they could fake their shoe size, but they don't realize that, especially if you're walking someplace where you're actually going to leave an imprint, that they can tell if the shoe was too big for you or if it was too small. You try to cram your feet into something small because of the way that person walked. And sometimes it's even not necessarily about the shoe, but about how they walk, their gait.
Yes, yes. And sometimes there's this one killer, and he didn't get caught by anything like that. He got caught because the family wasn't going along with his murder. Excuse me. And the daughter, what happened was the family, the daughter, grown daughter, she's like 19, 20 years old. She left the back door open to the house because she thought her brother probably forgot his key and he needed to get into the house. As it is, this killer found the house, the door was unlocked, and he went in and he attacked the father. Well, the point being that the father wasn't sitting down for it, so to speak. The mother attacked the guy. The daughter attacked the guy. They brought him down.
Idiot.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's obviously poor planning. And, underestimating underestimating the victim.
Exactly. And the victim wasn't really some big burly guy. He was just the average 5'7", a gentleman. But between himself, the wife, and the daughter, they pounded the hell out of the guy.
Yeah, he had no chance. Idiot. Yeah, and that's another thing that, and I'm going to point out that we are discussing this and we are not telling people how to kill people and how not to leave anything behind, because no matter what you do, you're going to leave something behind.
You always leave a trace. That's the long and the short of it. Always.
Yeah.
It could be sometimes it's so subtle, it's ridiculous, but other times it's blatantly obvious.
Yeah, and sometimes, the forensic team, whatever they're compiled of, the group, they'll look at something and sometimes they'll see something that they think is, it's a clue, but it's like out of place, something that it could be a receipt or, something very small, a diamond out of a ring or something, a man's ring or the killer's brain, something that was there but had no reason to be there unless the killer used it.
Yes, exactly. There's a case, it's called the Girl in the Box Killer, and this is an interesting case in that this guy grabbed a girl. She was hitchhiking, and he offered her a ride, got home, and I'm going to make the story short. He kept her in a box, like a coffin box, under his bed for 2 years.
Oh.
And he let her out once a day to eat crackers and go to the restroom. His wife participated in the brutality. They both abused her to no end. And finally one day, he left the house to go somewhere, and the wife said, I'm not going to play in this game any longer. She let the girl out. They both ran to a neighbor, and they called the police, and that's how they nailed him. But it's an interesting case in that the perpetrator's wife finally had enough and said, that's it, I'm done. And she rescued the poor girl.
So with that, I'm hoping was the wife coerced, or did she join in willingly?
She joined willingly. And
so
on
I hope
top
she
of
got
that,
in trouble as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, she was a willing participant until one day she just had enough.
Wow. That's very interesting, because she could have just let the girl go and then took off on her own. But the fact that she helped the girl escape, and I hope, I can't imagine the trauma being of that. And that poor girl, she must have been resilient, say the least, to
It's
endure.
unbelievable case. He let her out, I think it was like about once every 4 or 5 weeks, and under supervised visitation with her family. And he told her, if you say anything about what's really going on, when we return, I will slit your throat. And so she had to play this, oh, he's a nice guy, he let me live with him, and blah, 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 to her parents. But the reality was, they were sitting there with the killer.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Have you done this before?
Yes.
Or something similar?
Something similar. And some of these guys, you can edit this, so I'm just going to tell it like it is, all right? And excuse me, but I'm going to say it like it is, and it's a little crude. But one of these killers would bring his friends over and have them watch him abuse, torture, etc., the victim. And they got a kick out of it. They would drink, smoke cigars, and watch him do these dastardly deeds to the victim. One day, and this is where this gets a little edgy to talk about, but one day he took it too far. He stripped her, chained her to a chair, spread her legs. He had minutes earlier he had warmed up some turkey gravy. He spread her legs. He poured the turkey gravy between her legs, and then he let his dog lick it up. And his friends howled, clapped. They enjoyed it. It was like they were watching the Dodgers win the World Series or something.
Oh my God.
I mean, we're talking about some really, my girlfriend said to me one day, she says, how do you write this stuff? I said, I don't really know. I really don't.
No, I mean, you have to have some kind of thick skin, but it still boggles my mind of what one person can do to someone else. Whether it's a stranger or someone they're supposed to love or care for. It still boggles them.
It's really, really unusual. And murders are something that most people don't think about because they don't have to live with it.
Right.
But you think about this guy's wife. She participated willingly, and she watched this go down for a couple of years.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
I wonder, I'm just curious about what was the thing that made her say, okay, that's enough.
I don't know. It never came to light. And unfortunately, she wasn't available for any interviews. So I couldn't ask her that question straight out.
Was that something that you were thinking about?
Yeah, I really wanted to do it. I have, and I'm diverting just a second from this book. I have another book coming out, and I'll give you the tentative title. It's 2 Deaths, 1 Mistake. And it involves one person actively participating in 2 deaths that should have never occurred. And the deaths were ruled by the medical examiner as accidental. No way. Let me give you an example. One of them was a woman who was found naked, upside down, in a trash can with the lid closed on top in snowing weather for 28 days. And they ruled that an accidental death.
How do you accidentally go into a trash can head first and stay there when it's cold out? How is that an accident?
And how do you pull how do you pull the lid down over you?
Exactly. And whether it's not an accident, it's not self-harm, so that is, I don't know.
Amy, you gotta, I look at some of these cases and, I probably in my writing career have probably turned down 30 or 40 cases because I just couldn't get into them. They just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And this case doesn't make sense, but yet it gets my attention because it's too crazy.
Yeah. And when that book is ready, you're coming back to talk about that one too.
I'll be happy to. There's 2 cases in this book, in this new book, and I'll give you the other one that doesn't make sense, which is why I'm writing this book. So this gentleman whose left hand was injured severely, and he couldn't hold anything in his left hand. They found him in a chair in his office with a bullet hole to the left side of his head. I'm not done. When you fire a gun, even if unless you are a trained professional, there's going to be a serious amount of recoil, and more than likely the gun is going to fly out of your hands.
Right.
This gentleman had never fired a gun in his life. And the gun, when the police showed the photographs for the trial, the gun was neatly placed in his lap in his left hand. Give me a break.
Yeah, right? That's ridiculous. And I've heard of, people or killers trying to make it look like it was self-harm. And, obviously they didn't realize this guy couldn't use his left hand. Or sometimes they don't realize that maybe, like, they assume that everybody's right-handed, and, and then they put it in the right hand when it would actually make more sense to be in the left hand. And of course, I mean, it's not going to be placed neatly on your lap, or they shoot 2 bullets. It's like, you're already dead, but you're going to kill yourself one more time.
Right. I know. This is the stuff I shake my head sometimes when I'm writing this stuff and I'm going, come on, how can you be that doggone stupid?
Yeah, right, exactly. Years ago, I wrote, I had this, this fiction saga that I wrote, and a lot of it has to do with crime and stuff, and I did, one scene where, they had found this, man's body, but they thought it looked initially like self-harm, but there wasn't enough, and it was, a rifle was used on his face. So, when the coroner came, they thought that, they're like, well, there should be more blood, there should be brain matter, and there's not. And so, they figured out, obviously, that this person not hurt themselves, and it was actually a police officer, and it was like, it's just kind of part of this whole, serial killer thing that I had going on. But yeah, I mean, I've heard where that happened in real life, so it kind of just one of those things that stand out that you're right about. And it's like my son says, I love to watch different shows together, especially and movies, and he really likes ones that are, they're true to life, or they're based on a true story. And he's like, and we could be watching a movie about someone being killed, and he's like, you know what? He goes, that's terrible, because we already know that can happen in real life. And that's what he says.
Yeah.
I agree with him. And, and sometimes it's, I write nonfiction now, history, local history, and, some children's books. I just kind of found a new niche for myself. But I was writing a crime, and, I did a lot of, research, and I just like watching documentaries on, like, they have that one channel that has all types of documentaries on crime, and I find some of them are very interesting. And found one where there was a person who, he was laying down on the floor dead, and all they could see was it looked like a huge lump on his forehead. And it wasn't until, and the way he was lying, it was like he had fallen and tried to get up, and then he ended up on his back, and it turned out that he had been shot with a small caliber gun, and it hit from behind, and that lump was actually the bullet.
Oh, wow.
It went through his skull but it stopped, like, in his, in the front and of his forehead. So that's, it wasn't until the coroner opened him up and found that. It looked like a lump on his head.
Amy, I tell you, I've been doing this my whole career, and that's 40 years worth, by the way. And something happened about 3 years ago that I'm going to share with you, and I'm not going to write this story.
Okay.
but I'm going to tell you about it because it is without question the strangest of all I've ever come across. Okay. So the Los Angeles County coroner, the late Los Angeles County coroner, he passed away 3 years ago. But anyway, we were supposed to have lunch one particular day at Felipe's, which is a French dip restaurant in downtown LA, very famous, great food. And when I walked in, he was like laughing to himself. And he sat down and he said, I'm going to tell you something before we start to eat. I went, okay. He said, so this morning, listen to this. And I'm going to say I couldn't resist the humor at the end of this story. So you just got to pardon me for that. Go again. Anyway, he said, this morning I was in my office alone, which is very unusual. There's always somebody in there to answer the phone. The phone rang, and whatever got into me, I picked up the phone. I said, okay, so then what happened? He said, this gentleman identified himself, and he said, I'm a local chef and at a famous restaurant in Southern California.
I hope it wasn't.
What's that?
I said, I hope it wasn't the one you were at.
Yeah, right. Thankfully not. But anyway, so he said, this morning, he says, I decided to call you because he said, I have chopped up my wife into pieces. And for the last 4 days, I have been boiling her in the big stainless steel vats that we have in the kitchen. And while I'm talking to you, I'm eating her left arm.
Oh, okay.
And I looked at Ed and I said, I'm going to say something and you're probably going to be upset. I said, but did you happen to ask him if he made a side dish to go with the arm? I just couldn't resist it. It just had to come out.
I mean, what would be a side dish for an arm? I'm just trying to think. A foot? I have no idea.
Right. Yeah. You know what? That's what he should have come back and said, what should I have suggested as a side dish? But he just started laughing and that was the end of it.
Oh, man. Yeah, that is a very interesting case. Closed itself. Wow.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's out there. People don't realize that cannibalism is a real thing.
You know, I seriously looked at writing a book on cannibals, with the coroner's help. And I have two coroners that I work with who are thankfully still alive. But anyway, they were very instrumental in writing this book that we've been talking about. And, they're going to be instrumental in the new book. One of them is retired and the other one is still active. And they are both amazing women. I mean, their credentials are beyond credentials. And one day we were talking, those two coroners and Ed, the former LA coroner, the four of us were talking, and the question came up, does it make sense? Is it viable to write a book about cannibals? And I thought about it and I thought, well, I don't know, you know. So what I did was I decided to look at some cases, cannibal cases.
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, with the coroners, when we all talked again, the two that are living, I said, you know, how do we deal with this? He said, the first thing, they both said that almost at the same moment, the first thing you have to do is talk to the cannibal. And I went, okay, I guess that makes sense. So I decided to pick up the phone and call three of the wardens involved on three of the cases, three of the cannibals. And I was basically told to go screw off and die.
Really?
Absolutely. There's no way you're coming into this prison. And one of them hung up on me and called me a name I won't go into.
wow.
Yeah.
Maybe they, sounds like they're hiding maybe acts of that at their prison.
I don't know. I mean,
It, that's, maybe they don't want, I don't know, it's possible that these people, these cannibals are, if they're not, if they're in general population or with others, I don't know, maybe it's some kind of, where, nope, we don't want you to talk about it because they're still practicing.
I don't know. It's very, very strange. And some of the dastardly deeds, this one is my favorite, okay? This cannibal, in the South, he owned a roadside stand and he sold barbecue sandwiches. So what he would do is he would kill people, cut them up, cook the meat, and put the meat in the sandwiches that he sold.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously it blended in properly because if he kept serving it, people didn't pick up on it. And I could just imagine what they thought of after.
I asked the question, how does that happen? How could that be possible? And one of the corners, with a little bit of humor, turned around and said, I think it was all in the barbecue sauce.
I guess you would have to have a very, I don't know what human flesh tastes like, so, maybe.
Yeah, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, and if they're doing it before or after death, I think that would make a difference. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
That guy that, can't remember his name, but he made a suit out of sewing human skin together.
Right.
So that just kind of really interests me of how did he preserve it? I know it's kind of weird question, but it's just, it's like,
Well,
okay, so you did it.
that's the thing with the cannibals. The questions you have to ask are weird. Just by the nature of it. They're weird.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't realize, when they hear cannibalism, they think Jeffrey Dahmer. They don't, they're not thinking that, like the Hannibal Lecter series is just a movie.
Right.
But it was based off, they used real cases and, loosely based off of some real cases. And I just found that was very interesting. And I also learned that you can beat your own brain and not feel it. But
Yeah.
yeah. But this was such a great and powerful episode, and you are welcome back anytime. Discuss any case you want. I find it so fascinating, and I don't know, maybe I should have been a cop. Or an interrogator, at least. But questions, I think.
I'll tell you what, one of my former books, that I wrote, many moons ago, was written in collaboration with a dear friend who has unfortunately passed away, and he was a detective in LA. And when he would come over for dinner, and my girlfriend and I would, have dinner with him, and blah 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 blah. And it always came up. Tell me, how do you deal with this crap? It never failed. How do you deal with this crap? And he said, it's real simple. I ignore it. I just do my job. I ignore it.
He thinks of it as a job rather than, he well, that just kind of makes sense. You don't bring it home with you. You ignore the crap that comes out of their mouth, whether it's true or not. And you have to you do that, you have to know if the person that you're interrogating is telling the truth, and also if it helps to know some of the answers ahead of time before asking the questions. And then sometimes they throw you for a loop.
Unfortunately, in the case that he was working on at the time, which was the subject of my book, this gentleman was brought down for a crime he did not commit. However, he did commit XYZ. There's no doubt about that. He did. But he was brought down because they couldn't convict him on that. So they hung something else on him, a murder charge, which he did not commit the murder. And it just happened.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate. And I kept saying, how are you dealing with this? He says, I can't. I just have to go. I can't deal with it, put it in my head and try and process it. I just have to go about solving it. And that's it. No more, no less.
Wow. It makes sense.
Well, it does. And there's collateral damage to almost every case I've ever looked at. There's always collateral damage. And I'm going back to this book because there's collateral damage on this that I'm going to share with you that it brought tears to my eyes. So here we have a guy who's in jail waiting trial on murder. All right. And, he was a younger fellow in his early 20s, and through the research of the case, somehow or another, his girlfriend, they were yet to be married, befriended me. And one Saturday morning, she called me and she said, I want to go down and visit him at Men's Central Jail, which is now the Twin Towers. Anyway, would you mind taking me down there? I said, sure, no problem. So I went, picked her up. We went down to the jail, got admitted, and we sat down. And she looked at me and she says, may I? I said, okay. So she said, honey, to her boyfriend, honey, I'm pregnant. This guy, cold-blooded, possible killer,
Right.
convicted, and other horrendous crimes. He jumped up and out of away from the table and danced around the table. And when I got home, I relayed this story on to my girlfriend, and she said, what did you make of it? I said, you know what I made of it? He may be guilty of this, he may be guilty of that. Those were two people in love.
Yeah. He was still human.
That's it. Two people in love. That's what I made of it.
Yeah. That is so, and it's very understandable. I mean, people say these killers are monsters. Monsters aren't real. They're just humans who act like monsters.
Right.
It's not like monsters hiding in your closet or under your bed when you're a little kid, but that could be now, or at any point in time. There could be that monster, but in your closet or under your bed or waiting to pounce on you, but that's still a human. Who does horrendous things. And it is true that when you think of all of the humanity, and then if you think of animals and how they kill, but their kills are to feed. They need food, and it's part of their life cycle, things like that. There's no reason, there's no rhyme or reason to kill unless you're a cannibal, you might think that's how I eat.
Right.
Yes, that's the cannibal's life cycle. But, they're out there. There's a lot of killers that people just never heard of. And I think in some ways that's a good thing. And because, a lot of times when we're pointing out, oh, this killer did that, it's not, it's almost as that killer is becoming infamous, or glorified, where people forget about the victims or the victims and survivors of the crime. And it's not just, the victims or the survivors of a, violent crime. It affects everyone around them, from law enforcement, their families, to people reading the news. It affects me. I always try to, I watch these documentaries and I, learn about cases and I read true crime and I keep thinking, it's, how does one think about doing this? I, as a survivor of violent crime, and I am very grateful that it does take a long time for one to be strangled manually. That's how I was able to escape. But,
lucky.
Yeah, 20 years ago, my husband tried to kill me and he tried to beat me to death. And when that didn't work, he tried to strangle me, but it just, it took too long. So it gave me, just enough time to be able to escape.
Unbelievable story, Amy. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You're very, very fortunate. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that, but wow.
But even with that, I had to literally fight. This is back in 2005, 2006. But I had to literally fight to have grand jury met. I mean, he was arrested. My kids were put in foster care while I was in the hospital. And then when I got home, I had to go through all this stuff. Child services. They said, oh, you left their house, so, and your kids behind. I'm like, you wouldn't have hurt my kids. I know that. Just me.
Right.
And because he was mad at me and blamed me for everything that he's ever done wrong in his life, and he had just taken a speedball not long before. So it just that just added fuel to the fire. But, people use that as an excuse. If you're, an alcoholic or a drug addict, they try to use that as an excuse to commit heinous crimes. But in my opinion, just because I've been under it firsthand, that may give you the gumption or courage or, balls of steel, excuse my language, to do something. But underlying that, was that need to do that, and they just needed that extra push, so to speak, in order to actually do that.
That's a hell of a story.
He took he was in jail, then they released him, and I was trying to find out who was doing his case. They sent me from county to local and back and forth. Finally, I ended up going, a friend of mine knew a legislator who had some pull, and he got me a press conference. And with that, I went head to head with the district attorney and
Mhm.
finally got a grand jury. And then he had been out on bail, and they didn't know where he was. And I'm like, I know where he is. Cause I'm like, did you catch him yet? And they're like, no, we don't know where he is. I'm like, well, I can tell you exactly where he is. So I told them, the cops, where he was, and they went and they picked him back up. He thought, because I did a press conference, that he would get away with it because he thought of, it wouldn't be an unbiased jury, but he ended up taking a plea deal. I did a victim impact statement at his sentencing. He did 2 years in prison. They didn't give him time served, even though he had been in jail, but they didn't add that to it. And after he got out, 9 months later, he literally dropped dead in the shower.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I was just, it was me and I have 4 sons, but 3 were by him. And so I took care of them and raised them. And unfortunately, they saw bits and pieces of it and they had to deal with that. He died a half an hour before Father's Day.
Really?
Father's Day was the next day, and he died about 11:30 the night before. And I got a call from his friend. Actually, I got an email from his friend telling me he died. And at first I'm like, are you kidding me? This is a joke. So I called her, and I knew it wasn't a joke. And then I told my sons, and I'm like, I gotta talk to you. I tell you, your father's dead. And they looked at me and they're like, oh, so we're safe now? And I said, yes. And they're like, okay, can we go play now?
Oh my God.
And my sons they are just so amazing. They could have done bad things and then blame it on their childhood, because my dad did
Sure.
it, so I could do it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
they mirror themselves of how I was. They always tell me, even now, like when I have bad days, they're like, Mom, you've always been able to push through it, That's how they do it. So, I can't say, oh, I don't want to get out of bed. They're going to throw that stuff at me.
Yeah. It's, I could talk to you for hours at length, and it reminds me of this conversation, and your openness reminds me of the way these 2 coroners have communicated with me about the cases that they've seen and worked on, and it's amazing. It's amazing to hear it. You just don't like your case. You don't look at we've never met. We've talked a couple times. We've done, but I would have never ever figured you suffered a tragedy like that. Ever. It would have never come into my mind.
Thank you.
And God bless you. I mean, I'm so happy for you.
Thank you very much. Over the years, I've had people that knew my situation and would say, I have a friend, you talk to her. And so I would talk to them on the phone or in person sometimes. But most of the time they were in that situation. They hadn't gotten out yet. And they asked, they didn't know what to do. And I was in no position to tell them what they could and could not do. I gave them ways to, I gave them resources, stuff that I had learned over the years on, like, if you're planning to leave, what to do. I just ran and that was it. But I never would give them the advice to call the police. And because I think that is a personal decision. And because in the beginning, I was treated like I was going to drop the charges.
Mm-hmm.
It was just an assumption. And there are people that aren't, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, but they're not strong enough mentally or emotionally to go through a whole system with the law and things like that. And sometimes you just need to know that there are places that you can go and can help you.
And you know what else gets me in a lot of these situations is the not necessarily friends, but acquaintances, let's say it that way. They turn around and say, well, it's your fault. Wait a minute. You know, that really gets me. It's your fault. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, yes, it was, I realized who my friends were and who we had, as a couple, we had friends together.
Right. Right.
And they were, in the end, most of them sided with him, not because they sided with him because they were afraid. They're like, if he could do that to his wife, what could he do to us?
Yeah. Right.
I was dead when, I was lucky I had a job time where I could work from home or work in the office. And after a bunch of healing and after my press conferences went live, and then I showed up and I could hear whispers, and some were thinking, oh, you're so strong, and others were like, we thought you were a strong person, but you couldn't, how could you let this happen? I don't know. I was just making my kids blunt that's what I was doing at the time. Came up behind me, grabbed me by my ponytail, and that was it. It was the start of the longest 45 minutes of my life.
I'm sure. Well, Amy, again, God bless you. Someday we need to meet and have a cup of coffee. I would love to do that if the occasion could ever occur.
I would love that too. And also, anytime you just wish to talk off the air, just let me know. I'd be glad to talk with you. I've enjoyed this conversation very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to wrap up the show now. Before we keep going on and on. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you, audience, for listening. If you wish to be a guest on the show, go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast and schedule your pre-recording. Don't forget, if you wish to comment on this show or any show, comments are available, and yes, I will read them. Join me again next week for another great conversation. Please follow this podcast on Spotify, and if you want to check out my work, just Google me. I'm Amy Shannon. Be safe, be well, and always be kind.
Tune in here again next week for another tantalizing discussion. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast.